Hello and welcome to tonight's edition of Rendezvous at Goethe, a series of interviews initiated by Goethe-Institut Bucuresti as a result of this COVID pandemic that we're facing right now. And tonight I'm very honored to speak with Miron Zownir. Thank you very much for taking the time to speaking with us. And before we start, I would like to mention how this Rendezvous at Goethe is gonna look like. Miron and me will talk about a few topics regarding the pandemic situation, his experiences with that, and especially a project that he did here in Romania 2 years ago. But you, the spectators, are also very cordially invited to join in the discussion by asking questions in the chat. We will address these questions in the last half or last third of this discussion, which will in total last about 30 to 40 minutes. So please feel free to comment, to ask questions. We will be happy to address them as well. So, first of all, I would like to introduce today's guest, Miron Zownir. Miron is a street photographer, an author, a filmmaker, well known worldwide, especially for his street photography. Miron was born in 1953 in Karlsruhe in Germany to a Ukrainian father and a German mother. And he lived, apart from Karlsruhe, especially in some of the most interesting and vivid large cities of the world, namely Berlin, London, New York. Now he's back in Berlin, which is also from where he is joining us today. And Miron was maybe most fittingly described by famous US author Terry Southern as the poet of radical photography. And before we start into the actual discussion, I would like to give you a very short overview about past works by Miron to give you, the spectators, a bit of an overview of how Miron works and what his subjects are. Miron, maybe you would already like to tell our spectators a bit about your works that we see here, where they were made, where they were taken, and where you have been at that time.
Well, the photo you're seeing, I was shooting in 1980 in Berlin. In 75, I moved from Karlsruhe to Berlin and was trying to approach film school. I was rejected, and my girlfriend at the time was a photographer, so I borrowed her camera, went out on the streets and documented what most people at the time didn't want to see. So this is transgender punk in a Berlin nightclub.
Yeah. Here we go to your next step.
This is New York City, Times Square. I was living from 80 to 95 in United States, 9 years in New York City, then Los Angeles and Pittsburgh. And this was a street scene on Times Square at a time when it was probably the most vibrant, interesting spot on earth. I mean, if I talk about New York City, definitely.
And we have another picture from your past works.
This is 95 Moscow. I was Erotic Art Museum in Hamburg offered me a visit in Moscow under the premises to document the nightlife in Moscow, which was supposedly very vibrant at the time. But the moment I arrived in Moscow, I saw unbelievable many poor people starving around the train stations and all over the place. And probably after 2 days, I decided to change my intention, or the intention of the Erotic Art Museum, and focused on the misery in Moscow, which was in '95 unbelievable. So many people died on the street. Nobody really cared or had any know-how how to help them. It was a crash of communism. Many people lost their homes, and it was the most miserable time probably after the collapse of communism, definitely in Russia.
Yeah, I think thank you very much for these descriptions of the works. I think this gives us a good overview of where you come from, or a very short overview, of course, but very important for our spectators to understand also the nature of your work. What we can see in these photos is that you are a street photographer. You work a lot on the streets of big cities, urban environments, and so on and so forth. So I imagine that this Corona pandemic, and especially the lockdown, must have affected you to a great extent. Can you tell us how you experienced the lockdown, the beginning of everything closing down, and the Corona pandemic so far in Berlin?
Okay, first of all, in the beginning it didn't affect me at all, because I was writing on a novel. It was a novel about a situation out of normality, which I basically started as a short story a while ago, which was about economical crash, corruption, and even a virus. But I started this maybe a year ago. But when the Corona pandemic arrived, I was already 1 month ahead in a story, which of course I included that pandemic crisis, and I just finished this novel yesterday. So in the beginning, it basically, I wasn't focused on photography first, but after, I mean, I was aware of the emptiness in Berlin. It somehow started to fascinate me, and I was riding around with my bicycle, making photos of emptiness, deserted streets, and tried to cover somehow the atmosphere. And one thing which was most striking to me, how all of a sudden the poverty, the homeless, the bums were so visible and so isolated and so desperate. They had so much space, but they really had no home. And one of the most incredible remarks I heard during the crisis, also during demonstrations, was, how can you stay home if you don't have a home?
Indeed, yeah. And this is maybe a good point to show also a few pictures that you did then during this time of the lockdown, or it was, I assume, shortly after the lockdown. Can you tell us how you started taking these pictures and where they come from?
This is Alexanderplatz. This was at the beginning of the lockdown, because you see it in the emptiness. About 10,000 people an hour are crowding the Alexanderplatz. So this was around high noon. And you see on this photo maybe 2 or 3 people. So it was, and you see people in the beginning. I got the feelings that people took that pandemic crisis serious, which now that half step towards normality, I don't have the feeling is that people are really that much aware of it, or maybe they got sick of the restrictions. They already feel the economic pressure, which is will even increase. So I think people generally are maybe more frustrated and miserable now than at the beginning, when there was still the hope that it was just a time frame that you could somehow predict.
Yeah. Do you have plans on also covering this in your work? I mean, you have now, we see here pictures from your Corona Berlin series. It looks already bleak here with Alexanderplatz, just like you said, normally a place that you know with many, many people present. But other pictures from the series, we will see a few now, also depict the anger of the people. I assume they were taken at demonstrations.
Right. Yes, there were so many demonstrations, and I've never seen so many different viewpoints. Usually, if people demonstrate, they have one goal. But this time, there was the far right, it was the far left, it was the chaos, it was the techno freaks, it was the people who couldn't go into the betting offices anymore. It wasn't people who were suffering from not being able to attend their regular bar. So it was an incredible accumulation of different viewpoints which really clashed. And in the beginning, it was a little bit more peaceful, and later on, it got more and more violent. And but the violence was actually, which is not usual, as you know from many, especially recent events, the police was very discreet and pretty patient. I mean, I have seen many people insult them really personally, and there was kind of a non-confrontational attitude, which I must say, which de-escalated many things. And this is a lady, obviously Arabic, yelling at a policeman because they arrested her husband, who was pretty violent before they arrested him. But of course, I mean, for her, it's her husband, so it's an understandable anger, but I think he maybe went a little bit too far.
Might be. I think, like what you said, there were many different viewpoints during this demonstrations. The only joining factor, so to speak, was the frustration of the people. How do you experience it at the moment? How is life in Berlin? You already said people are a lot more relaxed. You told me before the interview that cultural events started happening again.
It's far from normal, except of that the people on the street hardly anymore wear any masks, that it's not unusual that you really have to step out into the street to avoid 4 or 5 people coming like a wall towards you. So there is not that much respect or awareness, really, that there are many potential victims. So the frustration level, of course, isn't that visible, but I find it a little respectless. That people, of course, frustration is understandable, and if you consider the economic problems which aroused, but still there is danger of infection. There are many old people, there are many people who have to keep contact with their parents or their grandparents, and I think whatever the reasons for frustration are, it shouldn't go beyond the fact to show some respect for those which are really still in danger, and it won't, even if in Germany now there are only 300 people infected, that doesn't mean it has to stay this way. I think it could be, it's always possible that there's another outbreak or even a worse mutation. So I think a little bit more awareness of the situation would be better.
Yeah, and regarding especially the situation of the cultural field, what are your experiences there? I mean, some people, like you said yourself, you were very lucky. You were working on a novel anyway, so I imagine you didn't feel the lockdown as much as some other people. But do you have the feeling that the art scene in Berlin struggled very hard with this time, also due to the fact that cultural events were not really possible? Or do you also see some positive effects, that people had more time to reconsider what they are doing, or to come up maybe with new formats, online-based formats or so?
First thing I have to say, of course, I was talking about me writing a novel, but the first exhibition that got cancelled was New York, Paris exhibition, which is the biggest, Paris photo is the biggest photo event in the world. And Benetaschen, my gallerist, was had already a stand and everything in New York City, which was moved from Paris, was a corporation. It was cancelled. Then my exhibition, Wolfgang Schulz and the photo scene from 80s, was postponed. Then my exhibition in International Center of Photography in Palermo was postponed, and it's not even clear if it's gonna be happening, since you know how Italy got devastated. Then two Rheinbeck-Hallen exhibition, Berlin 45 to 2000, was postponed. So for me personally, it had a lot of effects. And of course, on the cultural scene, it definitely had not just the established institutions. I think they are even better off than the alternative art centers with low budget, who took a risk. I mean, we're talking about taking a risk, because established institutions don't take a risk. They only take who's established already. But it is important to create endemic art. If you give small institutions, small galleries the chance, and as I know from my galleries, Benetaschen, probably 50%, between 30 and 50% of the photo galleries will only survive. So I don't see any positive aspect about this crisis, no matter what consciousness some people develop. I think this is this doesn't, stellt kein Gleichgewicht her.
There's no balance. Yeah,
yeah, right.
Yeah, that's a drastic number. 50% of galleries presumed to have to close. But it is something that from our experiences here in Cluj, I could also expect to happen. So it's a very dire situation. And like you said, for us coming from a smaller cultural center, we feel the same situation. But it's interesting to see that it's in Germany, where you normally expect a better financial safety network, that the situation is almost as dire as here in Romania, where independent art is also on a very tough financial basis normally. But you just talked about several exhibitions that were cancelled or possibly postponed. Let's hope for the latter. That's a good transition to our next topic, because we were actually also supposed to have an exhibition in spring this year of you here in Cluj, an exhibition titled Romania Raw, or not titled Romania Raw, but showing pictures from Romania Raw and your last Moscow project. This exhibition was organized by the Universitatea de Artă și Design, especially Dr. Ioan Spirciu and Mrs. Lazar, and in collaboration also with Pogo Books from Berlin and the Art Museum here, and us, the German Cultural Center of Cluj-Napoca. And we would have loved to have you here, Miron Zownir, to have had you here in spring, but the lockdown, of course, made it impossible. For our spectators, as an announcement, the exhibition will still happen. So it's one of the ones that are postponed, not cancelled. We will have the exhibition of Miron Zownir here from November 5 to November 29 in the Art Museum of Cluj-Napoca. I can guarantee you it is a very interesting exhibition, also with a very direct link to Romania, because half of the pictures, the Romania Raw series, was taken here in Romania during a residency you had in 2018, Miron, where you traveled the country and visited different Roma communities. One has to be frank and say Roma ghettos, actually. Can you tell us how this project came to be? When did you come up with a plan to come to Romania and to have a specific look at Roma communities in the country?
Well, it started out with Pogo Books, having a connection with Liviu Buleu and Olympia Lazar. He was visiting Romania, Cluj, maybe 2 years before, and he approached me and asked me if I would have interest in to stay in Cluj in connection with Liviu's and Olympia's art. How do you say? How would you describe what they were doing? They had interactions with other artists before. I think they had a residency for artists. So
yeah.
So I was invited, and I thought, yeah, I was very interested in it, and I was. I think it was. I don't know anymore if it was, it was in spring, and I arrived there, and first of all, I was extremely surprised how clean and modern Cluj was. And I thought, well, I'm in the wrong place. Because if I would have made photos just of Cluj, I could have gone back to my hometown, Karlsruhe. It was this very different from what I was expecting. But when I was driving but I was, of course, already through my research interested in periphery, the fringe, the underdogs, and of course the Roma. And when I was driving the first time in a cab with Liviu to Patarit, it was very hostile. It was incredible. People were yelling insults at us, maybe because of the cab. And I was getting out of the taxi, I was attacked by 4 dogs, and it was maybe a millimeter. They would have almost caught my leg. And I was thinking, oh God, how should I ever end up here making photos? But thanks to your help, who introduced me to Alex, the Roma kick,
Mr. Fekete,
boxing champion, and he introduced me to some of the major figures in Patarit. I got an introduction, and from there on, I could work there. Not always freely. It was sometimes hostile too, but it was at least possible. Anyway, I wanted to thank a lot of people in Romania. It was, next to Istanbul, the best network I've ever had in my life, with people supporting me, helping me in any way.
I'm very happy to hear that, and I must say the same. It's what you said in the very beginning. Most Germans do not have a clear image of Romania and of what to expect here, but what normally wins everybody over is the mentality and the open-mindedness and warm-heartedness of the people, especially here in Transylvania. That's the region I can talk from. And I thought maybe we can have a look at a few pictures that you took in I think several of them are from Mare and some also, or at least one from Patarit. Yeah.
Okay, this is Patarit. The first one is in Patarit, yeah, and it was, as you see, if you see this photo, it could be in Afghanistan or anywhere in the world, completely deserted, empty, poor, desperate. Kids. Actually, in all Roma ghettos, there were so many kids unprotected or somewhere in places where you would think, well, they face so much danger from pollution, from so many obstacles. It was a very, very intense experience, and this is very close to the biggest garbage disposal, I think, in Romania, right?
At least the largest one around here. Might be even one of the largest in the country. That's absolutely correct, yeah.
But I also found out, and this is incredible, from Olympia, that Patarit is gone. That the Roma don't live there anymore. This is, or I supposed to, they are supposed to leave, but I ask you, where are they going to? Where do they live? What alternative do they have? Did they provide something for them?
Well, we will see. One can certainly only hope so. But the issue has been a difficult one in the last years, and yeah, I'm not so optimistic that it will actually happen that all the families there will be evacuated and brought into better conditions. But especially,
sorry, are they evacuated?
No, I don't think so. Not that I've heard of. There are plans, I think, but we will see if that will happen. But looking at a picture like this, I also have a question for you. Because working with people who are like these children, and especially children as the most vulnerable part of our society, in such conditions, how is it for you? Can you maintain a professional emotional distance in a situation like that? Or how is your mode of working? You just take the pictures and you realize, so to speak, afterwards what you portrayed, or are you also affected emotionally while you're on the job?
Well, I'm definitely not a robot. I mean, I have my feelings are always there. Of course, there are two things. When I'm on a mission, there is a lot of adrenaline. There is an object. And there is the camera, which almost functions as a shield. So I could make photos of situations I might even not be able to stand without. Not about this, I mean, but there were other situations where they're not necessarily just about Romas, but I went into situations in my life which was really life-threatening, which were so even not only dangerous, but sometimes even repulsive smells and things, which I really, and I also have a rat phobia, but I have been in so many places which were infested by all kinds of vermin, but this was only possible because of that shield and that adrenaline, and that is almost like a survivor who is chased by enemies, real or imaginary. So, but still, of course, I have all human reactions like empathy or even or everything. I mean, not only positive, or sometimes I'm bothered, or I'm irritated, or I feel but whatever I feel, I can function as a photographer, and I only would take my camera away and not make a photo if it would be, if I could immediately, if someone would be in danger, and I could influence the situation. This is the, you see, I wouldn't, if someone would really depend on my help, and it would be a matter of making a photo or reaching out for that person, of course I would reach out and rather save his life or whatever I could. But other than that, of course, my focus and my mission is so strong that I would always pull the trigger. But
yeah,
my emotions are almost there. But in this case, it was, of course, it was a lot of empathy and sympathy for those kids. But at the same time, subconsciously, there's always that helplessness. You cannot change anything, even if you give every one of them chocolate ice cream or Coca-Cola or whatever, you know, or a smile, of course, which, but it basically doesn't change the situation. So I'm not much more than than a spectator who can maybe make aware of something, but not more than that.
Yeah.
It's a kind of a helplessness, a feeling of helplessness sometimes too.
I can imagine. Yeah, and I think we have some more pictures from your series. I think the next one might be from Myanmar,
Right.
again with lots of children. Yeah.
The interesting thing about this photo is in the back they burned some rubber tires.
Mm-hmm.
It was unbelievably smelly. It was dangerous. There were poisonous fumes. But those kids in the front, in their victory pose, they are so incredible. I mean, it looks like they are so alive and so cocky, and so as if they live in another world, are not even aware of really in what pollution and poisonous environments they're really living. So this is this photo just it would be great if it would if from the Zika pose it would really signal some positive vibes. But I don't know if it's possible.
That's a very good point, because I also wanted to ask you about one aspect. I look at a lot of your photos, and you often take photos of people who are on the opposite of the winning part of life, who are parts of really marginalized societies, of really who suffer a lot. But from my point of view, you avoid with all your photos of making them what I would call poverty porn. You avoid just showing the people in their misery, in the horrible state. Is this something you do cautiously, or is it more instinctive that you try to leave the subjects of your photographs also at least their dignity?
This is a very good point, because this is not up to me. If poverty or people who live in rich environments, this doesn't mean if you are rich, you're always happy. And if you are poor, you are not always miserable. Life is so much more than etiquettes. Of course, those kids have it 1,000 times tougher than rich kids, but if they are less happy, I don't know. So of course, I show people as they really are. If they are mean, if they are dirty, if they are happy, if they are cool, if they are whatever. I don't censor myself and I don't censor anyone, because I don't have one topic I want to show the world. I am completely loose, open, and unorthodox. So I think this makes my photos unpredictable and authentic.
Yeah, thank you very much for the enlightening answer. We have, I think, 2 more photos where we can have a quick look, and then we will also open the discussion for questions from the spectators. I think this is also from Mare, right?
Yes. I mean, you look at this photo and you say, how is it possible? It's water. I mean, if you could order water or sunshine at the internet, every other luxurious item would be secondary. It wouldn't even count anymore. This is the most precious things we have. And I don't care who is responsible for this, but this is an offense to every sense, of course. And these kids living in there, it's painful.
Yeah.
And I cannot understand how this could be tolerated, or how could anyone tolerate living 10 feet away from this?
A complex question. I think we will go to the last picture. This is also a strong one, I think, also from Mare.
Yes, and what you said about questions, yes, my photos raise questions. They don't give answers. I think it's much more important that people make up their own mind instead of trying to be obtrusive and tell them or show them what you want them to think. This is bullshit. I don't believe in Eigenverantwortung, people's own
responsibility. Yeah.
Yes, and people should really make up their own minds.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry. Yeah. About this. Yeah, he is in incredible good shape, tough. The symbols are really very interesting, and he looks pretty mean and tough, but obviously, since I'm never intimidated or phony, I think I can catch pretty, and I have no prejudice, and I'm very unorthodox and spontaneous. I think it's possible to get that kind of closeness, even if you don't know someone.
Yeah, that is a very good moment to also allow for some questions from the audience, I think. And to start with one is, it's actually still a question from me, but I was wondering, You just talked about not being intimidated and so, and I know that you also worked as a, how do you say, a bouncer in New York, right? And funnily enough, there's another famous German bouncer who's also a relatively celebrated photographer from the Berghain, Sven Marquardt. Do you think there is a connection that being a bouncer and being a photographer asks for some shared qualities like reading people, understanding people or so?
No, I don't think at all. I mean, Marquardt's photos are completely different. He goes with them, he is setting up the light, he puts them in front of a background. It's complete. Maybe he started out as a street photographer, but I don't. I mean, these are not photos like I did of Hells Angels or of fights.
Sorry.
Sorry, yeah.
I meant not between him and you, but between the two jobs, because you were a bouncer and a photographer. Do you have some skills that you need in both jobs, so to speak?
Yes, but I mean, I would say 99% of bouncers never made, maybe they did a handy photo, but I don't think they were photographers. And all the great photographers in the world I know, I think I'm the only bouncer.
Okay.
But of course, you as a bouncer, I'm telling you one thing about a bouncer, because you gotta watch, you gotta anticipate, you gotta be smooth. And in all my time as a bouncer in New York City, and I'm very happy for this. I never had to hit someone. You know, because if you are fast, smooth, and anticipate, you sometimes really can avoid stupid escalations.
I can imagine, yes. I have one question here from the audience. I will read it to you. Okay. Miron, can you tell us about your activity as a filmmaker? Do you work on similar themes as in your photographs?
Well, it's completely different. When I'm making a photo, it's what's out there. I cannot, it has nothing to do with my imagination or what I would like to show. It's what's out there. When you do films, there is white paper and you do your script and storyboard, and then you cast, and then you have to interact with people. It's completely, the only thing is the visual quality, and some maybe of the renegades, iconoclasts and outcasts I cast have a similarity, but in a way, I think it's still very, very different. I mean, there are only aspects you could basically connect or could see or could feel that there is a connection. It's always me. I mean, I choose. I mean, I'm not an objective documentary photographer. I'm a subjective documentary photographer. So, of course, everything I'm doing is subjective. But if I would be an objective photographer, I would have nothing to do with my writings or my filmmaking.
Yeah. I have one more question here. That is actually also an interesting one. If you prefer shooting in black and white, which is also what we've seen. We've only seen black and white photos of you, and why you do so?
Well, I grew up with a black and white world. I mean, when I was 5 or 6 years old, television started on a much higher visual qualities, and now everything was film, everything was black and white, all the tableaus were black and white. My Brothers Grimm book was with black etchings, Andersen. I grew up in a black and white world, and all my favorite photographers are black and white. And I don't know if it's true, but I think you dream in black and white has more shadows, more dark spots, more maybe more mystery. So I don't have any problems with colors, but for me it was a natural choice. But I didn't even think about that choice. It was a natural.
And a very quick question in between. What kind of camera do you use? Do you use a digital or analog camera, or both?
I never used digital in my life. I was always analog. I started out with Canon. Bullshit. Nikon. So, Nikon. I never had Canon. Nikon, and but since maybe 10 years, I'm using Contax. All I think 3 different Contax cameras, because it's a very point and shoot camera. It's very fast, so it's for my purpose. It's I think it's better.
Okay, super. I think we will actually have to come to an end. We're already a bit over the time. Yes, it passed fast. I wanted to remind the audience that we will have an exhibition of Miron Zownir here in Cluj, together with the Art University, at the Art Museum in November. So if you want to see Miron's works live, you can come there later this year. I want to say a big thank you both to Miron, of course. Thank you for being with us and for taking your time. Also to all our spectators, and special thanks to Alex Andrei from Goethe-Institut for technical support. For everybody who is interested in the series of events, you can find other interviews that are part of Rendezvous at Goethe with cultural managers, artists, musicians, and others on the Facebook page of Goethe-Institut, and all these videos, including this one, will also be uploaded to YouTube, where you can find them again. So, Miron, thank you very much.
And thank you. Thank you, Ingo, and I would like to, of course, thank everybody in Romania who really helped making this project possible. I'm very excited about the exhibition in Cluj, and everybody who helped me and supported me in Romania will be also honored in my under special thanks in my Romania Raw book, which will present it in Cluj anyway.
Super. We're looking forward. Okay. Thank you all. Have a nice evening, and till next time. Bye-bye.
Ciao.